Hi guys, welcome back to my channel where the gnome live. This is Sharon Oyella, and this is actually a re-upload of a video I had just put up the other day, and then I had to take it down due to a safety issue. In the video I was showing you how I cut these acorns and hollow them out. I was using a Dremel, and I was also using whittling gloves to protect my fingers, and apparently that is a safety issue. I'm going to let you Google how to protect your fingers while you're using a Dremel, but in this video I was using these gloves here, and that is a no-no. And a big thank you to the commenter who let me know that was a safety issue. I really appreciate that. With all that said, we're going to get started back into the video I had uploaded the other day with the safety issues edited out. The last month or so I've been working with walnuts, and I made a tiny little doll, the one of my fingers here, for the walnut, but by happy chance she also fits inside an acorn. So I wanted to pass along a few things that I've learned about working with acorns because they are a little bit flimsy and they're easy to crack. So I thought I'd pass along a couple of things that I've learned along the way. And then at the end of the video, I'm going to show you what's underneath this purple wrap here. I have grouped all the walnuts and the acorns and those little mushroom dolls that I made in the last couple of videos. I've grouped them all together and they've made an adorable little world. If you'd like to skip ahead to that, use the pin comment below and look for the timestamps. I use these little paper fasteners, the ones that you stick through paper and you open up the prongs. And I'm going to use that as my closure. But I found just underneath the edge of the paper fastener is a little bit rough, and it would pull my string apart, so I just sanded it down with my emery board. And you can also shorten up those prongs by cutting off the tip of the prongs. This is a silicone mat, and that will just keep the acorn from sliding around. And now I'm going to make a little dot where I want the hole to go. Just make sure, put the cap on there so you don't put the hole too high. And then I start with my awl first and get a dent started. You want to make a dent or a little hole to start with your awl so the drill doesn't slide around on the acorn and cause scratches. And then you turn your Dremel on before you touch the acorn. So turn your Dremel on and then onto that dent that you just made with your awl. In my previous video, the one that I just edited, I had done the order a little bit different. I had hollowed out the acorn before I drilled the side of the acorn, but a commenter graciously suggested to leave the nut inside and then drill the side of the acorn, which is helpful. So I've done it that way for this video. Although you can do it either way, it works just fine. As long as you work gently and you have something inside the acorn shell to hold that pressure, you can drill it just fine either way. Alright, now we're going to put a hole in the bottom of the acorn, but first we're going to file off that tip using an emery board. I'm just showing you here, that's the point that I sanded down on the left side. And now I can use my awl and just kind of poke a hole in there. You actually don't even need a drill doing it this way, or a Dremel. I can just poke the hole right through with my awl. And there's no cracks this way. Just work gently though. And I'm just going to make that hole a little bit bigger now that I've got it started. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger with my Dremel. So again, turn the Dremel on and then stick it into that hole that you made with the awl. Alright, now we're going to cut the top of the acorn off. And the first thing I learned is if you cut it too close to the top, it's very difficult to get the nut out because the acorn does taper near the top. That's the part that sits underneath the cap. And I did try to save as much of the acorn as possible, and by cutting it so close, but I ended up cracking the sides. So I found the easiest way to do it is just draw a line where it starts to taper, and that's where your cut line will be. And it's just so much easier to get the nut out of there that way. So on my Dremel, I do have this little guard here to be used with the saw, but I'm not going to use it for this video only. I highly recommend you use the guard. I have safety glasses on, so in case anything comes flying off my Dremel, my eyes are protected. Then I pinched the acorn top and bottom between my finger and my thumb, and I turn the Dremel on before you touch the acorn. Turn the Dremel on, and then I'm pushing the Dremel down towards the table and away from my fingers. So down towards the table, away from my fingers. And once you got all the way around, then you can pull the top off. And then the nut is still probably going to be hard to remove without breaking it up a little bit. So I just use a pointy knife and gently pushing it in there and breaking it up, and then I can pull it out with my tweezers. And acorns have a little film on the inside. It's kind of like cotton. It's very like dusty. So I just scrape all that away because I do want to glue some fabric in, and I didn't know if that cotton would keep the fabric from being glued to the shell of the acorn. So the edges where we cut with our Dremel saw will be a little bit rough, and I found I can sand those down really nice just using my emery board. However, if you have a sanding block with your Dremel, you can use that as well. Just keep an eye on how much pressure that you're using, because the sanding block on the Dremel will bring the material down a lot faster than an emery board will. So, and you might end up taking off too much. So just keep an eye on that. An emery board does the trick. If you don't have one, then go ahead and use your sanding block that came with your Dremel. All right, so like I said earlier, I'm going to be putting in a paper fastener for my closure, but my paper fastener is a little bit too big for that hole. So I have to make that hole on the side of the acorn a little bit longer. But again, I don't want to crack it, so I'm just going to make sure I have something inside the acorn that can relieve some of the pressure as I'm putting the Dremel there. So I'm just filling up some space with some tissue, and then I'm going to stick my Dremel into that hole, but pull it down towards the side so it will elongate the hole itself, so I can stick that paper fastener in there. And there, that hole now is more like an oval shape, and my paper fastener will fit inside there no problem. So I am going to line this acorn with fabric. You don't have to do that, but I did find that lining it with fabric will strengthen up the acorn because these are pretty flimsy on their own. So I'm just putting in the paper fastener and I'm opening up those prongs and pushing them to the side of the wall of the acorn. But I want to make sure that there's enough space between the little button of the paper fastener and the acorn, so I can wrap my string around there 3 times. So I'm just making sure that I can do that before I completely open up those prongs inside. Otherwise, that little button thing might not be, won't allow enough space to wrap the string around. So now that I've wrapped my string around, I'm opening up those prongs and pushing them to the wall of the acorn. So now I can line it with the fabric. All right, so I found the easiest way to line the acorn, because it's very small inside there, is just cut a 2.5-inch square of fabric and then make a circle out of that square. You don't have to be exact. And then I'm going to cut this circle right in half, and then I'm going to cut it in half again. So I'm going to work with 2 pieces. You don't have to do it this way. You can just kind of make a cone out of that half circle and shove it in, but I found sometimes the bulk was a little bit too much to work with. And then I'm going to use my paintbrush to get the glue in there evenly on 1/2. Just worried about the 1/2 right now. Stick my 1/2 piece on top and then use my felt pen cap to push it inside. And then I'm going to push in all the sides. I'm going to cut off the excess, but just let the thing sit for a few minutes to let that glue grab on. Otherwise the fabric will keep pulling out on you. Now I'm going to do the other half, same thing, painting it in there and then pushing that fabric down, and then cutting off the excess. All right, so working on the cap now. Nothing fancy has to be done here. I haven't had any issues with cracking at all. I can't guarantee yours won't crack, but for me, I haven't had any caps crack. So I just use my Dremel, and right close to the stem, I drill a hole. So now we can attach our strings, and I'm using wax thread, so I'm going to go right through the cap from the underside to the top side. And I'm going to do a double knot, pull it pretty tight. And I'm just going to check and make sure that knot doesn't pull through the hole in my cap. And it's good, so I'm going to pull it out a little bit. I'm going to cut off the excess, and then I'm going to use tacky glue and put it right into that hole there. And then I'll pull the knot down into the hole and push it in with my fingernail as far as it'll go. And then once that's dry, the tacky glue will hold the string in place. And now we can cut the other end, and you might have to reopen that hole of the acorn if the fabric was glued over top of it, so just use your awl to push it through, and then you can put the string from the inside to the outside of the acorn. I'm going to push the shell into the cap, and I want to add a bead here at the end of my string, but I just want to see how much string I need. So I'm going to wrap it around my button 3 or 4 times, and then I can go ahead and knot the bottom of the string so my bead won't fall off. And I do use a little bit of tacky glue on the knot just so the knot won't ever break free. And then I can cut off the excess, and there we go. Alright guys, I wanted to show you one more thing that I do with my acorns. Now this is not necessary to the project at all, But you can see that the shell and the cap will not stick together unless you have a string to hold them closed. But I found with a certain glue, once it's cured, it will actually act like a little bit of a rubber stopper, and it keeps that shell inside the cap without it falling out. But you will need a string on top of that, of course, to keep it secure. You don't want to just rely on the glue itself. So using E6000, the clear kind, I just spread it all around inside the cap there using the applicator of the bottle itself. And then to get it up around the edges, I use this little paddle tool, a little flat paddle tool, and just pull it up along the inside edge of the acorn cap. And to put it on the nut itself, I just, again using the paddle, just spread it around the top edge, the very top edge of the acorn shell. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes under a fan where it's dry enough that you can touch it, although it takes 24 to 72 hours before it's fully cured. But 15 to 20 minutes under a fan, and you can go ahead and work with it. And you can see here, it just kind of holds the cap and the acorn together. If you do it this way, do make sure that you poke a hole after 15 minutes or so. Reopen those holes, because once the E6000 is cured, I'm not sure you'll be able to do that. So do it after 15-20 minutes. But again, guys, that E6000 is not necessary. I just like the way it feels. The one on the left has none, and you can see that it won't hold together without the string attached. And the one on the right has the E6000, and it holds together without the string attached. All right, my friends, I'm just going to include a little idea for you if you're stumped for ideas on what to do with these walnuts and little stick pin girls and stuff like that. I've decided to group them all together. So in my last video, I showed you how to make the basic stand using foil, masking tape, and paper towel, which I've done right here. And then after the paper towel is dry, you can go ahead and paint it. All that technique is shown in my last video, like I said. And then you can just group them all together, and that's what I've done here. Called this Heading to See Grandma, because I got Grandma glued to the little walnut here. This walnut is the very first one I ever worked on, and that was in 2013. If you want to see more information on this walnut, I'll put the link in the pinned comment below. But yeah, that was my first experience with furnishing a walnut. So I just finally gave it a little character, and because she has gray hair, I've decided to call her Grandma, and these are all her little grandchildren coming to see her up the hill. So let's take a closer look at this new little world here. I'm absolutely in love with this thing. And it's so simple to make, guys. Just that foil, masking tape, and paper towel, and then you go ahead and paint it. So a lot of my work, I will put it together, and then I'll let it dry, and then I'll cut out a piece like I've done here. I've carved out a little cave, and usually I put paper towel in there and paint it as well. But for this one, I ran out of time, and I wanted to get this video up for you. So there's just masking tape on the inside. So I hollowed all the foil out, and then I made a couple of little windows. And on top of the window, I put half a acorn cap, and this little hollowed out part will take a tea light inside. And those tea lights, I get them at the dollar store. So when I turn off my lights, you can see it's lit up. I could do a lot more with that world, but I was trying to rush to get it ready for this video. But isn't this just adorable? This is going to sit on my desk now. You're probably going to see this in future videos until I find a place for it in the forest across my craft room. All right, and I'm going to show you one more thing before I leave, because I had a commenter say they wanted to see Torturo in a walnut. And by happy chance, I made one for my daughter's boyfriend for Christmas, just this last Christmas. So I used Sculpey clay to make the Tortoros, hollowed out the walnut, gave it a hinge, painted the inside blue, and then added a few clouds. And the Tortoros are just sitting on a stick that I glued inside there, and a little bit of moss. And isn't this just the sweetest thing? And don't forget, guys, I have a video all about working with walnuts, so if you're interested in seeing that, look in the timestamps below for the video link. And that brings us to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and until next time.